Ladies and gentlemen, there's a strange thing that happens in life, in relationships, and even in the workplace. When you stop caring so much suddenly, others start to care. You've probably felt it before. You chase, you give, you bend over backward, and yet people take you for granted. But then one day you stop, you pull back, you focus on yourself, and what happens? They notice, they reach out, they start to wonder. It's not magic, it's psychology. People are often blind to what's always available. Constant attention, affection, or support becomes expected, not appreciated. But when you detach, when you shift your energy inward, people begin to see your value. This isn't about being cold or cruel. It's about understanding your worth. When you stop over-caring, you stop over-giving, and that balance is powerful. So remember this, your attention is a gift. Don't give it to those who treat it like a guarantee. Don't pour yourself into places that don't pour back. Self-respect is the foundation upon which every healthy relationship, whether personal or professional, is built. When you value yourself, others are more likely to follow suit. It's not just about how you carry yourself physically. It's about the energy you project, the standards you uphold, and the boundaries you enforce. People instinctively recognize when someone has a strong sense of self-worth, and they respond to it with either admiration or discomfort, depending on their own insecurities. But regardless of their response, one thing becomes clear. When you respect yourself, you command a different level of treatment. Too often, people confuse caring deeply with sacrificing themselves entirely. They give and give, hoping their loyalty will eventually be reciprocated, but in reality, excessive self-sacrifice often teaches others how to undervalue you. When you're always available, always accommodating, and always forgiving, people can begin to see your kindness as a weakness rather than a strength. It's not that they're inherently ungrateful. It's just that familiarity, when not balanced with self-respect, can breed complacency. The absence of boundaries makes it easy for others to forget where you end and they begin. Self-respect is expressed through your choices, the way you respond to mistreatment, how you allow others to speak to you, and the standards you maintain even when no one else is watching. It's in choosing silence over arguments that go nowhere, peace over pleasing, and distance over disrespect. It's in knowing when to walk away, not out of pride, but out of principle. The moment you begin treating yourself like someone who matters is the moment the world starts to take note. When you stop chasing validation from others and instead begin validating yourself, everything changes. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth or convince people to value you. You simply become someone who lives in alignment with their own truth, and that alignment is magnetic. People are naturally drawn to those who are centered, confident, and not easily shaken by external approval or criticism. They admire it, and often they begin to mirror it in their own behavior toward you. This doesn't mean being arrogant or emotionally distant. Self-respect isn't about building walls. It's about creating healthy boundaries. It's not about being above others. It's about knowing you're not beneath them. When you carry yourself with quiet confidence, you communicate something powerful, that your time, energy, and presence are not to be taken lightly. This unspoken message is often more impactful than any demand you could ever voice. In many relationships, dynamics shift drastically once one person reclaims their self-respect. The constant need to please fades away, replaced by a steady resolve to be authentic. And ironically, this is when the other person often starts to pay more attention. Why? Because your energy changes. You are no longer coming from a place of lack or neediness. You're no longer saying, "I need you to love me," but rather, "I love me, and I choose who gets close to that love." That shift in power is unmistakable. What's important to understand is that self-respect doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet decisions made in solitude, choosing not to text back, refusing to engage in petty conflict, or deciding to leave a situation that's been draining you. These choices may go unnoticed at first, but they create ripples. Over time, people begin to sense that you are no longer someone they can take lightly, and they adjust accordingly. Ultimately, when you make self-respect a non-negotiable in your life, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see you, and that inner shift is where true empowerment begins. It's not about forcing others to treat you better, it's about treating yourself better and letting the rest follow naturally. When you stop undervaluing yourself, you set the tone for how the world will treat you. Because self-respect isn't just attractive, it's transformative. Every human interaction is an exchange of energy. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're constantly sending signals through your tone, your presence, your focus, and even your silence. The energy you bring into a relationship or situation often determines how others respond to you. When you are overly invested in someone who isn't matching your effort, your energy becomes one-sided, imbalanced, and eventually unappreciated. But when you shift your focus and pull that energy back, people feel it, sometimes more deeply than words could ever convey. There's a powerful psychological effect that happens when someone who used to pour energy into you suddenly withdraws it. At first, it may cause confusion or even denial. The other person may not consciously register what's happening, but they feel the absence. Where there was once attention, enthusiasm, or emotional support, there's now stillness. That stillness can be loud. It confronts them with the reality of what they were taking for granted. It creates a vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. That's why, often, the moment you stop showing up the way you always have is the moment they begin to notice your worth. This shift isn't always about punishing others or manipulating outcomes. It's about reclaiming your energy. When you realize that constantly overextending yourself is draining you and doing little to change the behavior of others, it becomes clear that something must change. Redirecting that energy back to yourself is an act of self-preservation. It says, I matter too. My needs, my peace, and my time deserve attention. And while others might not applaud your decision at first, they will inevitably feel the difference. People become accustomed to the energy you provide. If you're always the one reaching out, checking in, solving problems, or offering emotional labor, it becomes expected. Your generosity becomes the baseline. And when something becomes routine, it's no longer special, it's assumed. But once that energy is withdrawn, it disrupts the rhythm. It forces others to reassess the dynamic. Why aren't they chasing me anymore? Why does it feel like they're slipping away? These questions stir awareness, often sparking the very care and curiosity you were longing for in the first place. The truth is, you don't have to beg for attention when you understand the power of energy. You simply shift it. You stop watering dead plants. You stop feeding into people who only show up when it benefits them. You begin pouring that attention into yourself, your goals, your peace, your self-worth. And in doing so, you shift the gravitational pull. People start to feel your absence more than they ever appreciated your presence. That shift alone can change the entire dynamic of a relationship. It's important to understand that energy doesn't lie. You can say you're fine while feeling resentful underneath, but people will pick up on the disconnect. On the other hand, when you're truly detached, not pretending, but genuinely unbothered, people feel that too. It's a calm, collected presence that's hard to ignore. You're no longer emotionally chasing or reacting. You're simply existing on your own terms. That creates curiosity. It makes people wonder what changed and why they're no longer at the center of your attention. Sometimes The most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining yourself, stop over-communicating, stop overextending. Just shift your energy, move differently, speak less, focus more. Energy speaks volumes without uttering a word. And when people notice that your vibe has changed, it sends a louder message than any confrontation ever could. It's a declaration that you've evolved beyond the dynamic that once kept you emotionally tethered. When you begin protecting your energy and becoming selective with where it goes, your entire environment changes. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You recognize that your emotional investment is valuable, and not everyone deserves access to it. And the more you shift that energy back to yourself, the more you become a magnet, not because you're chasing anyone, but because you're finally holding space for your own growth and healing. And in that space, everything else starts to shift around you. Neediness, at its core, stems from a place of emotional insecurity, a feeling that something vital is missing and must be filled by someone else. It often expresses itself through constant seeking, seeking approval, seeking attention, seeking reassurance. While the intentions behind it may be innocent, the energy it radiates can be overwhelming. When someone feels that you are clinging to them emotionally, it puts unspoken pressure on the relationship. Instead of feeling drawn toward you, they feel a subconscious urge to pull away, not out of malice, but from an instinctive desire to regain balance. Confidence, on the other hand, stems from inner wholeness. It's the understanding that your value doesn't hinge on how someone else feels about you. When you're confident, you're not trying to prove anything, you simply are. You're rooted in your own sense of worth, your own path, and your own fulfillment. This grounded energy is incredibly attractive. People are drawn to those who seem complete within themselves, not because they need something, but because they want to share something genuine and whole. The paradox here is that the more you try to pull people closer out of desperation, the more likely they are to move away. Neediness feels like emotional debt. It silently asks the other person to take responsibility for your happiness. That kind of burden, even if unspoken, can be emotionally exhausting. Confidence, in contrast, offers emotional freedom. It says, I'm good with or without you, but I enjoy your presence. That kind of attitude doesn't push people away. It invites them in with warmth, not pressure. People are intuitive, even if they can't articulate what they're sensing. They notice when someone is constantly fishing for compliments or validation. They sense when someone's trying too hard to impress or be liked. And rather than feeling compassion, they often begin to feel discomfort or even avoidance. This is because neediness signals a lack of self-trust, and people are less inclined to invest deeply in someone who doesn't seem secure in themselves. It's human nature to feel more comfortable around those who exude certainty and calm. Confidence doesn't mean being perfect or emotionless. It means being self-assured even in imperfection. It's knowing that you have value even when you're vulnerable, and that you don't need someone to rescue you to feel whole. It's the quiet power of saying, I have flaws, but I'm still worthy of love, respect, and joy. This kind of inner stability is like gravity. It grounds you, and it draws people in. They trust you more, respect you more, and often they become more willing to invest emotionally because your strength doesn't demand anything. It simply invites connection. When you act from a place of need, you unconsciously send the message that you don't trust the natural flow of relationships. You try to force closeness, rush intimacy, or earn love through effort, but real connection doesn't respond well to force. It blossoms in space. Confidence allows that space to exist. It says, I trust that the right people will stay. I don't need to hold on tightly to prove my worth. This mindset fosters mutual respect and allows deeper, more authentic relationships to grow. One of the most empowering things you can do is break the cycle of overgiving and over-explaining in hopes of being chosen. When you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, you flip the dynamic entirely. Instead of asking, "Am I enough for them?" you begin to ask, "Are they aligned with what I deserve?" That subtle yet profound change shifts how people perceive you. You go from being someone who pleads for attention to someone who commands it effortlessly. Your presence becomes a privilege, not an obligation. True confidence doesn't boast or beg, it simply is. It's a quiet knowing that you don't have to grip tightly to be held, that the right people won't need convincing, and that your value isn't determined by who stays or who leaves. In that stillness, that certainty, you become magnetic, and suddenly the same people who once overlooked you begin to wonder what changed, why you're no longer trying, why you're no longer available at their convenience. That's the power of stepping out of neediness and standing in confidence. It changes the game without ever raising your voice. Detachment is often misunderstood. People confuse it with indifference or emotional coldness, but in reality, true detachment is not about shutting down your heart, it's about protecting it. It's about choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and alignment over attachment. When you detach from needing a particular outcome or needing someone to act a certain way, you take back control of your emotional life. You're no longer a puppet to other people's moods or behaviors. You become the anchor, not the sail. Emotional attachment, especially when unhealthy, can feel like bondage. You tie your happiness, your self-worth, and your sense of stability to how another person treats you, to whether they text back, to whether they validate you in the way you want. And the moment they don't, your world feels like it's crumbling. But when you learn to detach, you reclaim your center. You begin to experience a shift from external dependence to internal strength. You're no longer waiting on someone else to hand you peace, you've found it within yourself. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without losing yourself in the process. It means being able to love deeply while also understanding that you cannot control someone else's choices, loyalty, or presence. It allows you to hold space for others while holding firm boundaries for yourself. That balance is where real power lies. You stop clinging, stop forcing, and stop fearing loss, because you understand that your well-being no longer hinges on someone else's actions. One of the most liberating moments in life is when you realize you don't need to chase closure, explanations, or reciprocation to move forward. Detachment gives you that liberation. You stop needing validation from people who never saw you clearly in the first place. You stop explaining your worth. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. In this space of emotional neutrality, you find clarity. You see the situation as it is, not as your fears or desires wish it to be. The power of detachment lies in the freedom it creates. When you're no longer emotionally entangled in the need to control or fix things, you regain your ability to think clearly, act intentionally, and preserve your dignity. Instead of reacting impulsively to disappointments, you respond thoughtfully. Instead of lashing out or begging for answers, you pause, you protect your energy. That calm detachment sends a clear message to the world. I know my value, and I don't need to fight to prove it. In relationships, detachment can shift the entire dynamic. When you stop obsessing over being chosen, people begin to see your independence and self-assurance. They recognize that you're not afraid to walk away, and that alone changes how they treat you. There is something incredibly powerful about someone who stays by choice, not by desperation. Detachment allows you to be fully present without being emotionally hostage to the outcome. You enjoy the moment without fear of losing it. Detachment also strengthens your decision making. When you're not operating from fear or emotional dependency, your choices become clearer. You're able to assess situations based on facts, not just feelings. You stop settling for half-effort love or one-sided attention. You don't cling to people who consistently hurt you. Why? Because your self-worth is no longer on trial. Detachment creates space for discernment. It helps you see who is truly aligned with your growth and who is merely comfortable in your chaos. Perhaps the greatest power of detachment is the peace it brings. That deep, unshakable calm that says, whatever happens, I'll be okay. It's the ability to walk away with your head held high, not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself enough to let go. In this state, you no longer demand closure, chase affection, or lower your standards to keep anyone. You simply observe, decide, and protect your peace. That in itself is one of the most powerful positions you can ever stand in. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They don't shut people out. They teach people how to enter your life respectfully. The way you define and enforce your boundaries is directly tied to the way others perceive and value you. When you set clear limits on how you want to be treated, you send a message about your self-worth. Without boundaries, you become available for everything, and in becoming available for everything, you eventually stand for nothing. People sense that, and unfortunately, human nature often leads us to value what is rare, not what is always on call. When you constantly say yes to things that drain you, when you continue to tolerate disrespect or emotional negligence, you slowly erode your own sense of self. It's not just about the external treatment, it's about the internal narrative you create. Each time you allow someone to cross your line without consequence, you're silently telling yourself that your comfort doesn't matter, that your feelings are negotiable. But when you start setting boundaries, firmly, clearly, and consistently, you begin to rewrite that inner script. You begin to tell yourself, I am worthy of peace, I am worthy of respect, I am worthy of healthy connection. Boundaries are also the blueprint for healthy relationships. They create structure in interactions, a framework that allows both people to feel safe and respected. Contrary to popular belief, boundaries don't push good people away. They filter out the ones who are only around to take. People who truly care about you will appreciate your clarity. They will adjust because they value your presence. It's those who benefited from your lack of boundaries who are most likely to complain or resist once you begin to enforce them. And that reaction is, in itself, a revelation. In many relationships, value gets lost not because someone stopped loving, but because one person stopped protecting their space. Constant availability leads to assumed access. When you never say no, when you're always reachable, always giving, and never requesting, you become easy to overlook. That's not because you aren't valuable. It's because you haven't asked to be valued. Boundaries restore that balance. They remind people that your time, energy, and attention are earned, not owed. It's important to remember that boundaries are not about punishment. They are about clarity. They are less about controlling other people and more about controlling what you allow in your life. You can't dictate someone else's behavior, but you can dictate your response to it. You can decide what you will walk away from, what you will no longer tolerate, and where you will place your emotional energy. This self-regulation is a powerful form of self-love. It tells the world, I choose me, even when it's uncomfortable. The fear many people have about setting boundaries comes from the belief that it will lead to loss of connection, love, or approval. But what is the value of connection that only exists when you suppress yourself? What is the worth of love that asks you to shrink? The truth is, any relationship that falls apart because you finally chose to protect your peace was never built on mutual respect to begin with. Boundaries may shift who stays in your life, but they ensure that whoever remains is aligned with your truth. One of the most empowering moments in life is when you realize you don't have to explain, justify, or defend your boundaries. They are yours to define, whether it's choosing not to engage in certain conversations, limiting time with energy, draining people, or prioritizing rest over obligation. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to disappoint others in order to remain loyal to yourself, and when you do, you begin to feel a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. As you continue to create and enforce boundaries, something transformative happens. People begin to respect you more, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. You become someone whose time feels precious, whose presence carries weight. You teach others how to treat you, not through anger or confrontation, but through consistent, self-respecting action. That is how boundaries create value. They don't just tell people what you expect. They show people what you believe you deserve. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you possess, yet it is often misunderstood and undervalued. In a world that constantly pushes for instant responses, continuous communication, and emotional overexposure, silence becomes a rare and potent form of expression. It is not emptiness, it is presence. Silence can carry weight, clarity, and strength in ways that words often cannot. When used intentionally, it becomes a boundary, a mirror, and a declaration all at once. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any explanation you could ever give. When you stop responding to disrespect, manipulation, or emotional games, your absence becomes your answer. People can argue with your words, twist your meaning, or deny your feelings, but they cannot debate your silence. It forces reflection, it shifts the dynamic, it makes people sit with their actions and confront the echo of what they've caused, and in that uncomfortable space they often realize what your presence once provided. There's a reason silence unsettles those who have grown used to your emotional labor. When you were always available, always explaining, always forgiving, they took comfort in your voice, even if they never truly listened to it. But the moment you go quiet, they begin to notice the silence you leave behind. It's not just a lack of sound, it's the absence of validation, reassurance, or emotional access. That absence can be deafening, especially for those who once took it for granted. Silence also serves as a powerful form of self-control. It allows you to step back, gather yourself, and respond from a place of intention rather than impulse. Not every comment deserves your energy. Not every conflict deserves your participation. Silence helps you conserve your power and decide where to invest it. When you no longer react to every provocation or feel the need to justify your decisions, you rise above the noise. Your restraint becomes your protection, and your distance becomes your defense. In emotionally charged situations, silence often brings clarity. It clears the fog of conflict and reveals what words may have hidden. When you remove yourself from chaotic exchanges and simply observe, you begin to see patterns, motives, and truths that may have been blurred in the heat of the moment. This observational silence can be eye-opening. It gives you perspective and helps you distinguish between genuine connection and emotional dependency. Silence can also be a profound act of self-respect. There comes a point when speaking no longer serves your growth, when your words fall on deaf ears or are continuously misinterpreted. In those moments, choosing silence is not weakness, it's maturity. It says, I will no longer waste energy trying to prove my worth. It says, I have said all I need to say. This type of silence is dignified. It doesn't beg, plead, or persuade. It simply exits. Moreover, silence has the unique ability to reset relationships. When you withdraw your voice, your energy, and your emotional investment, it forces others to reevaluate your role in their lives. It gives them space to miss you, to reflect, and to question their own behavior. Many times, people don't truly appreciate your presence until it's no longer guaranteed. Your silence becomes the wake-up call they never expected, but often the one they needed most. Lastly, silence allows healing. It creates the space necessary for self-reflection, for emotional processing, and for inner peace. When you're always speaking, always explaining, you rarely give yourself time to listen to your own needs, your own wounds, and your own truth. Silence turns down the external volume so you can hear your inner voice more clearly. And in that sacred stillness, you often find answers, strength, and clarity that no outside conversation could have ever provided. There's something magnetic about a person who is fully immersed in their own growth. When you stop pouring your energy into chasing others and start investing that energy into yourself, everything begins to shift. You become centered, fulfilled, and independent. People are naturally drawn to those who radiate self-assurance and purpose. This attraction isn't rooted in arrogance or ego. It's born from the quiet confidence of someone who no longer seeks external validation to feel whole. And ironically, the moment you stop focusing on getting attention is often the moment you begin receiving more of it. The truth is, attention is often a reflection of energy. When you're constantly fixated on how someone else sees you, what they think, or whether they value you, your energy becomes scattered. You're no longer living for yourself. You're existing for their reaction. That energy is felt. It can come across as desperation, insecurity, or emotional dependence. But when you redirect your focus inward, toward your own healing, passions, and peace, you reclaim that power. You start living for your growth instead of their approval, and that shift is undeniable. Self-focus doesn't mean you disregard others or close yourself off emotionally. It means you make yourself the priority. You start taking care of your physical and mental health, setting goals that fulfill you, surrounding yourself with people who inspire and uplift you. You commit to becoming the best version of yourself, not to impress anyone, but because you deserve to thrive. And when people witness that transformation, they can't help but take notice. It's not your appearance that captivates them. It's your evolution, your momentum, your inner fire. There's something incredibly attractive about someone who knows who they are and where they're going. When you're aligned with your purpose, when you're minding your business, building your dreams, and living in integrity, people start to see you differently. The same ones who once overlooked you may begin to look again, this time with curiosity and admiration. They sense the difference in your presence. You're no longer trying to fit into their world. You're building your own, and that kind of power changes how you're perceived. This transformation also disrupts the dynamics of relationships. When you stop centering someone else in your world, they feel that shift. They're no longer being fed by your constant attention or emotional dependence, and sometimes that makes them uncomfortable, not because you've wronged them, but because they've grown used to your availability. Your silence, your distance, your focus on yourself, it forces them to reflect. Suddenly, they wonder why you're no longer chasing, why you're no longer proving. They wonder if they misjudged your worth, and often they did. Focusing on yourself also raises your standards. As you grow, heal, and evolve, you become less tolerant of behavior that doesn't match your new mindset. You're no longer as easily impressed, manipulated, or emotionally shaken. You begin to protect your peace fiercely, not out of bitterness, but because you've learned what it takes to maintain your joy. This emotional maturity sets a new tone for how others engage with you. If they want access to you, They have to rise to the level you've worked so hard to reach. What's most beautiful about this journey is that you no longer need them to notice. You're not doing it for them. Their recognition becomes irrelevant because your fulfillment no longer depends on being seen. It comes from doing the work and loving yourself through every step of it. You begin to value solitude, to enjoy your own company, to celebrate your small victories in silence. And that quiet confidence builds a foundation that no one can shake, because it wasn't built on applause, but on self-belief. Ironically, the more you detach from needing their validation, the more it seems to show up. People notice when you stop showing up for them the way you used to. They notice when you glow differently, when your energy feels grounded and unbothered. Some return with apologies, others with curiosity. But the point is, you're no longer moved by their timing. You're no longer shrinking yourself for space in their lives. You've created your own space, and the world can't help but pay attention to someone who's finally standing in it. In the end, it becomes clear that when you stop chasing external validation, stop overgiving, and start investing in yourself, everything changes. The people who truly matter will be drawn to you not because you're desperately trying to gain their approval, but because you've learned the art of valuing yourself. When you stop caring about the outcome and begin to care more about your own growth, you shift the entire dynamic of your relationships. They may start to care, but only because they now see the value you've always carried within you. It's through detachment, boundaries, confidence, and silence that you rediscover your power and reclaim your sense of self. The more you focus on your own journey, your healing, your goals, your boundaries, the more you begin to attract the right energy into your life. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you've found your peace and are no longer willing to settle for anything less than what you deserve. Remember, you are worthy of respect, love, and genuine connection, and that starts with how you treat yourself. So stop chasing after people, stop clinging to outcomes, and start living fully for yourself. As you evolve, so too will the world around you. The more you focus on you, the more they will notice, and in the end it will be on your terms.